The neon lights of the Late Night with Seth Meyers studio bathed the sleek stage in a warm, deceptive glow. The audience, a sea of mostly progressive-leaning faces, buzzed with expectation. They were ready to see their host, the sharp-witted Seth Meyers, dismantle yet another conservative guest. But they hadn't fully understood who they were dealing with tonight. And now, Seth announced with a mock dramatic flourish, please welcome Dame, MAGA's very own rising star, Karoline Leavitt. Polite applause rippled through the room, tinged with skepticism. Karoline stepped onto the stage with the poise of a seasoned veteran, not a 27-year-old newcomer. Dressed smartly in a bold red blazer over a crisp white blouse, she wore an easy, confident smile, unbothered by the atmosphere. As she settled into the chair opposite Seth's desk, the host wasted no time. So, Karoline, Seth began, flashing his signature smirk, how does it feel to represent a political movement that's, let's just say, not exactly popular in rooms like this? The audience chuckled. It was a classic bait. Karoline didn't flinch. She leaned forward slightly, her tone as warm as it was sharp. Feels great, Seth, she said with a wink. When you're standing for truth, popularity in certain rooms isn't really the goal. It's about doing what's right, not what's fashionable. The crowd's laughter stumbled into silence, impressed despite themselves. Seth raised an eyebrow, clearly recalculating. He pivoted. You talk a lot about truth, Karoline, he said mockingly. Is that what you call banning books and censoring history? A low murmur of approval swept through the audience. Karoline nodded calmly. We're not banning history, Seth. We're refusing to allow activists to rewrite it. There's a difference between teaching facts and pushing agendas. I'm all for facts, even the uncomfortable ones. The directness of her answer stunned the room. Even Seth, for a brief second, looked caught off guard. He chuckled awkwardly, adjusting his cue cards. Wow, coming in hot tonight, he muttered. Karoline just smiled wider, knowing she had already shifted the tone of the night. Seth regrouped quickly. He wasn't going to let her dominate so easily. All right, well, he said mock solemn. Serious question. Given everything going on, insurrections, misinformation, TikTok brainwashing, do you ever think maybe it's time your side took a little accountability? The audience roared in approval, practically smelling blood. Karoline didn't blink. Accountability is essential, she said, and that's why I'm here. I take accountability for standing up for working-class Americans ignored by elitist institutions, including most of the people who write your jokes. The shot landed clean. Even a few members of the audience let out reluctant laughs. Seth pressed on, determined. You talk about elitism, but you're on a national TV show in New York City. Isn't that a little ironic? Karoline shrugged lightly as if the accusation bounced right off her. Maybe, Seth, but I'm not afraid to step into rooms where I'm outnumbered. It's easy to preach to the choir. It's a lot harder to stand in the fire. The audience went uncharacteristically quiet, a rare victory for any conservative guest on this show. Seth's smile tightened. You're very good at slogans, he said dryly. Is there an actual plan somewhere under all that Instagram sparkle? The insult was thinly veiled. Karoline laughed softly, not insulted but energized. Better an Instagram sparkle than a TikTok meltdown, she quipped. Then she added, voice steelier. My plan is simple. Secure the border. Empower families, protect freedom, and make sure my generation inherits a country worth living in, not one suffocated by student debt, fake activism, and broken promises. The studio lights seemed to glow a little hotter. Seth adjusted in his chair, visibly uncomfortable. Karoline had just flipped the entire room's energy. She wasn't merely surviving, she was winning. By now, the dynamic had completely shifted. Seth, usually the one steering conversations with biting wit, found himself reactive, even defensive. He tried one last angle, smiling sweetly. One last question, Karoline Bowman, he said, voice dripping with fake innocence. If Trump is the answer, what exactly was the question? The audience erupted, sensing a grand finale. Karoline's answer was immediate and lethal. The question, she said, her voice clear and unwavering, was, who will stand up to a corrupt system that's forgotten ordinary Americans? And love him or hate him, Trump was the only one brave enough to say, "I will." Silence. Then a wave of applause, small at first, but growing. Seth blinked, genuinely stunned. For the first time all night, he had no witty comeback. He laughed awkwardly, then said, "Well, you certainly came prepared." Karoline smiled warmly. "I always come prepared when I'm defending the truth." As the credits rolled and the cameras pulled back, Karoline stood, waving to the audience with the casual grace of a champion. Seth extended his hand, a formality, and she shook it firmly. Backstage, as she walked toward the exit, her phone buzzed nonstop. Texts, tweets, and headlines exploding with admiration. Even some of her harshest critics were forced to admit Karoline Leavitt had just dominated one of the toughest stages in late-night television. As the cameras cut and the studio lights dimmed, Karoline Leavitt walked off stage with the same composed energy she had carried throughout the show. A few production assistants rushed by, some sneaking, impressed glances her way. Something she noticed but chose not to react to. Behind her, Seth Meyers was still sitting at his desk, staring at his notes with a faint frown. It wasn't anger, not really, more like stunned realization. She had not just survived, she had dominated. A junior producer with a headset met Karoline near the backstage corridor, smiling sheepishly. Miss Leavitt," he said, almost hesitating. "Just wanted to say that was actually really good." Karoline gave a polite nod. "Thanks," she said, smoothing down her red blazer. "I figured I'd make it interesting." As she moved toward the green room, a few audience members, who had been invited backstage for a post-show tour, lingered awkwardly nearby. One of them, a young woman wearing a Vote Blue pin, unexpectedly called out, "Hey, I don't agree with you, but you were impressive out there." Karoline turned, offered a warm but firm smile, and simply replied, "That's the beauty of America. We can disagree and still respect strength." The young woman gave a reluctant nod. A few others murmured in agreement. Inside the green room, Karoline's phone was lighting up like a Christmas tree. Text after text. "You crushed it. Flawless." Trending #1 right now. Karoline Leavitt owns late night. CNN even had to admit you handled the heat better than expected. She chuckled quietly to herself. She wasn't there to score likes from the usual media echo chambers. She was there to prove something deeper. That conviction, when armed with clarity and courage, could still cut through the thickest bias. A knock at the door. It was one of Seth's senior producers, holding a clipboard awkwardly. "Miss Leavitt, just so you know," he said, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "We don't usually say this, but if you ever want to come back, the door's open." Karoline smiled, not out of arrogance, but out of quiet triumph. "Thanks," she said, slipping her phone into her purse. "But next time you might want to bring tougher questions." She walked out of the building into the cool New York night, the city buzzing around her, the stars above shining sharply in the dark. Almost as sharply as she had tonight. And somewhere inside, Seth Meyers sat back in his chair, still processing how the youngest conservative firebrand in America had walked into his house and walked out the undefeated champion.